Hello and welcome. We are going to look at 6A notes, proportional equations. The idea with proportional equations is that you have a fraction equal a fraction, but we're going to be doing a lot of setup and a lot of solving. Solving means you get that variable all by itself. But we're going to look at it in a handful of like mixed different setups so we see how they're all really the same thing. But sometimes they look a little bit different at the start. So first, let's write down kind of what our order of steps usually is. The first step that we're going to do each time is cross multiply. And that means when we take the denominator of each side and we multiply diagonally across. Some people call this other methods, like a butterfly method or stuff like that. Sometimes people criticize this method, but for proportions where you have a fraction equals a fraction. No, nothing else. You just have one fraction on the left, one fraction on the right, and an equal sign in the middle. And that's all you have. When that is the case, you can do this method. So we would cross multiply. And if you look across this first row, it's already done in these first two examples. But then I see the third and fourth examples, it's not done. So I want to see what it would look like. Cross multiplying means I'd multiply 11 times the x and 3 times the 33. And when I look at that, out of this list of options, the one that would work is 11x equals 99. That would be the result from cross multiply. Similarly, on the other side, it has the cross multiply, but I have a couple of options here. I'm going to choose this third line that says 7x plus 3 equals 2 times x plus 8. And the idea there is that I'm just multiplying, but I'm not fully distributing yet. So let's kind of get to this second step. Distribute would be my second step if it's there. I have nothing distribute. I don't in the first example. There's no parentheses that require me to multiply into them. But in this second one, I do. This 3 on the outside can multiply to both the x and the 4. It becomes 3x plus 12, because 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 4 is 12. Similarly, I get 7x plus 63. Down to the last one, after distributing, it's going to say 7x plus 21 equals 2x plus 16. It does get a little bit cut off just from the squeeze of that. We could kind of scoot this over a little to try and see it a little better. I might do that for the examples that you all have. All right, now the third step. I have things multiplied, no more fractions. My fractions are gone. But at this point, I'm going to kind of separate or combine terms. What I want is the x's with the x's and the constants or the numbers with the numbers. So I'm going to separate and combine. Now that's already done when it says 4x equals 84. That's still the same. So when it says skip, it's really just saying I already have this done. I don't have to redo it. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to crop it a little bit. I'm going to copy and paste it because it's still the same. Nothing changed in that first example. But over here, I would need to subtract 3x from both sides or subtract 7x from both sides and subtract 12 from both sides or subtract 63 from both sides. Now, for those of you who remember, we have a tool that's been helpful to do this, math.new. And I could say 3x plus 12 equals 7x plus 63. So I have 3x plus 12 equals 7x plus 63. And on this one, I believe it has minus 7x to both sides. So we get the 7x's make a 0. And the minus 7x and the 3x makes a negative 4x. And then we minus 12 to both sides as well. And that's how we're getting the negative 4x equals 51. So we still have a lot of algebra going on. So I have negative 4x equals 51. Similarly, on this very last one, it's going to be 5x equals negative 5, where I have the x's subtracted or added to one side and the numbers subtracted or added to the other side. Last thing that I'm going to do after this is I'm going to divide, which means I want x to be just by itself. If there's a number in front of x, I just want it to be only x. So I divide by that coefficient is the name of that number out front. So I divide by 4, divide by -4. On this last one, I'm going to divide by 11. And then on the final one, I'm going to divide by 5. All right, so we have all these things kind of fit together. And in the end, it's just kind of simplifying. You could say this is my solution, where x is by itself. Solution means it's solved, means x is solo. So x is by itself in each one of these. That's how I know that I'm done. And sometimes I'm going to get a fraction. Sometimes I'm going to get a positive number. Sometimes I'm going to get a negative number. That's the gist of what we're looking at. So let's look at how we would do this from scratch. So I have x over 5 equals 14 over 20. If I want to do that in math.new, I just say x slash 5. Now I'm going to use my right arrow key to move over. Equals 14 divided by 20. Now there's a lot of things you could do here. In fact, I could go ahead and just click on the 14 over 20 because it's math.new and it will simplify fractions for me. That gives me 7 over 10. I still have different denominators, so I don't necessarily know what x equals, but let's go ahead and cross multiply. Now to cross multiply, you can just drag. So I can drag this 10 over here. I can drag this 5 over here. And you might be thinking, Mr. Butler, why didn't you just do 10 divided by 5 and go from there? You can shortcut a lot of things. You can. You do not have to. You can take different paths. The path that I showed you with cross multiplying, grouping x's and numbers, then dividing, that will always work, but other paths will also work. They will eventually get to the same end. Now that I have this, 10x equals 35, my last step here is divide by that coefficient, and I'll get x equals 35 over 10. I could leave it like that. I could simplify it. I could even get a decimal for it. In your assessments that you do in my class, I will be expecting a decimal answer. You can't use symbols like a slash for divide or fraction, so we'll be looking for the decimal answer for it to calculate an exact decimal type value. Now that I have all this, I can screenshot, so I'll do my keyboard shortcut for screenshot. I'm actually going to do this kind of as a pair of screenshots because it's such a long list, but I can put that as two things next to each other. So I'll put in my first screenshot, make it a little bit smaller. Then I'll put in my second screenshot with the second half down here. You can screenshot however makes sense to you, but it's always good to kind of keep track of your work. I really encourage you using the math.new tool throughout this. It will make your life that much easier, so much easier. All right. Now for this next one, it's going to have a little bit more complexity to it. We're going to have more of those steps going on, and I notice that because I have x plus something down here. Well, let's see what happens. If I have 20 divided by x plus 1 equals 5 divided by x. I'm going to cross multiply. Now to cross multiply, I can just drag that denominator over. And notice when I drag this x, it doesn't really work. So I need to do something where I'm dragging the whole denominator over. Two ways that I could do that. I could click on the plus sign, and that should drag. No, that doesn't. All right, so I'm going to show you the two ways. One is you hold the shift key to highlight multiple parts of a term, and that'll let you drag it over. But I'm going to show you my favorite. My favorite is I start dragging one piece, and then I have to hit the Alt key. If you were on a MacBook, it would be the Option key. But I just tap the Alt key, and that will include more of that denominator or more of that term, that group. Now I have 20x equals 5x plus 1. I need to distribute. I know it's going to be 5x plus 5, but if I'm using math.new, I'm going to drag that 5 to the inside so it multiplies to both pieces. At this point, I need to get the x's and the numbers separated and combined. So I have all x's on one side, all numbers on the other. So I'm going to subtract that 5x from both sides. And on the right side, I got to put the minus 5x with the plus 5x. Notice that I drag the minus sign to do that. If I were doing, if I started dragging the 5 instead, I would have to click that Alt button again to get the whole term to come with me, not just the 5. On the left side, it's already set up that I can just click the subtract sign to simplify to 15x equals 5. Now I'm going to divide both sides by 15. So I clicked on the equal sign, click divide by 15, and I get x equals 5 over 15, which is a completely acceptable answer. But for your assessment, since you can't use symbols like a divide or slash, and you got to type in just a numerical value, you want to get all the way down to the decimal approximation. This is an approximation. It would be rounded off. You will have a kind of lower and upper bound. So as long as you're within about 5% of this answer, you're going to get it right. If you put 0.32, if you put 0.34, if you put 0.33, any one of those should come out correct. Okay, so now I need to zoom out, and I need to get all that work in there. It's a lot of work, but that's okay. It's one of the reasons that I also encourage you to use that math.new. It lays out all the details for you so that you don't have to think about doing it all yourself. So I'm going to capture that, paste it in there, but shrink it down. And I'm going to capture the rest. I'll probably just make this a taller one, and that's okay. Again, when you complete your assessment, you are going to need to show work. It is acceptable to show work using math.new or on paper or dry erase board. But you will have to show this amount of work, otherwise your score will get disqualified. As we get to the next stage here, and we're setting up proportions, the whole idea is to match corresponding or matching pieces. So let's see what we mean by that. I have a question mark. So I'm going to say the question mark is my x. This x is like the single side instead of the twin sides, the pair of sides that are equal. Like on the other side here, it has 7 and 7. On this side, I have 21 and 21. So right here, where it says 7 and 7, I know that the 7s go with the 21s. That means the question mark goes with the 8. So I'm going to have x go with the 8. And the x was on this bigger triangle with the 21s. So on the top then is bigger triangles. And that'll be 21 over 7, because the 21s and the 7s go together. Now that I have all this, I could type this into math.new and just see what it simplifies to. So I have x over 8 equals 21 over 7. I could cross multiply, but here's another reason why it might just be easy to like simplify. Oh look, my fraction disappeared. And then when I multiply the 8 over there, this is a slightly different path, but it still gets me to a single answer, where I got x all by itself. Again, this is kind of the foundation, the older math that you probably already have done in previous grade levels. But now we're just reviewing it because we're going to use this whole setup quite a bit. Just trying to crop this a little bit, make it in there. All right, for this last one, I'm going to do the setup, but I'm going to leave the remainder of the notes, which also has a little bit of a follow-up video for you to watch, and fill in some blanks there. Okay, so the question mark, the 3, and then I got all these. Here's how I would set this up. I noticed that the 3 is the short side, so I'm going to find the short side on the other one. That would be 18. And then I look at this question mark, that's going to be my x. And I'm trying to determine, is the x the long side or the medium? And to me, visually, I look at it and it looks like the long side. So then I'm going to match it with the long side from the other one, and that would have been 42. So 3 over 18 equals x over 42. You're going to do a lot of matching when it comes to setting up these equations. That's kind of the newer part when you get into geometry, is making sure you're using matching pieces. All this algebra, you've done that before. All right, that's going to be the end of this video, but again, to get this fully complete, you should be answering some of these notes from these other articles and videos down here. Those are very short, kind of 2 minutes apiece for each of those things. But at least get through the algebra and stuff up at the top. All right, thank you.